Manitoba has a new premier.
This is a great victory for all of us in Manitoba.
Wabkinu's NDP has won a majority in Manitoba, beating out an incumbent Conservative party that had been in power for more than 7 years. Kinu's campaign focused on health care, a balanced budget, and stronger bail reform. Joining us from the University of Manitoba Indigenous Studies professor and columnist McEwen Sinclair. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Lindsey. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you on. Okay, so before this election, the Conservatives had won 2 majorities in a row. These election results are being called an orange wave or an orange crush. What pushed the NDP to a majority here?
It's pretty simple. When the history books are written about this election, it will be as much about the disastrous campaign that the Conservatives ran, which was full of racial stereotyping and attacks on Indigenous women in landfills. And as much as that, it is also about the message that Wabkinu brought to Manitoba, which was one of unity. But he really united the province around the issue of healthcare and the mismanagement of the Conservatives over the past 7 years.
I want to expand on one of the points that you just made, because Wabkinu, we know, is the first First Nations premier of a Canadian province. And early in the campaign, he said this election would be about race. Was it?
Yeah, it was because it wasn't just about the Conservative Party in this incarnation, but the previous one under Manitoba former Premier Brian Pallister. They endlessly brought up Wabkinu's race and talked about him as a criminal, talked about him as a troubled youth, and sort of said he was never recoverable, didn't deserve a second chance. And in his victory speech last night, Wabkinu said first right off, I'm a person that got a second chance. I had trouble when I was a young man. In fact, that was how he kicked off the campaign as well, saying that I have a long history. Some of that involves the police, some of it involves addictions, and he worked very hard. I've known this guy for a very long period of time. Our families are interconnected, and so I've known him since his troubled times. I know him now, and absolutely 100% in every measure possible way, he is a person who has rehabilitated himself, not only privately but publicly, and he's also a proud father and someone who's done a very strong job to try to prepare himself to now lead Manitoba NDP to deal with the biggest issue of all, which is healthcare, which is just at a terrible state in Manitoba.
Professor, you talked about that victory speech. I want our viewers right now to take a listen to a little bit of it.
And if you're dealing with some kind of illness and you want to find healing, it has to be you to decide to move forward. I can't do that for you. A government can't do that for you. You have.
So that was directed at youth, as you mentioned. It is rare that elected officials shift responsibility to an individual rather than sort of touting their planned policy improvement goals. What do you make of that message in particular?
So that message was twofold. He did make it clear that he was talking to youth, but he used the term Nietzsche. Now, anyone in the First Nations world, the Anishinaabe world that I'm in, knows that that means Indigenous youth. And he's referring to his own past and the fact that he said just a second before that, I got a second chance, but I had to find a reason. And the reason that he pointed to were all the people on stage with him. His wife, Lisa, who's a doctor and grew up on social assistance, his 3 sons, and his mother. He got the entire crowd to sing happy birthday to his mother, whose birthday was yesterday, quite a birthday present. And what he was talking about there was about trying to get Indigenous youth, which are the largest employable sector of the province, and first-time voters. There was 20,000 first-time voters last night, and they came out in record numbers. We had record turnout for the election. 60% of Manitoba turned out to vote. That is astronomical compared to the 30 to 40% we're used to seeing in provinces and federal elections. So what you're seeing is Indigenous youth in Manitoba being inspired by seeing a First Nations young man, but also hearing the voice of a party that is very diverse. If you look at the Manitoba NDP, there's trans, there's queer, LGBTQ, there's women, there's racialized people, BIPOC people, and they are a very diverse group of people. So this party has caught the energy, and you cannot ignore that it is an Obama-esque kind of energy in Manitoba. And Wab Kinew said that. He said, Manitoba, something special is happening here that isn't happening in Canadian cities or provinces across the country. And that if we think about Manitoba's history, Manitoba is the first step after Confederation. And while conflictual involving Indigenous peoples, we've somehow found a way to have more Indigenous peoples in the mainstream in business and private and the public sphere than pretty much anywhere else.
Well, Professor Sinclair, we appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.
Yeah, Miigwech, thanks.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this, be sure to subscribe here, or you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.